Good evening, Mr. Sabra, and all my dear students and my colleagues and ISM members of Bashveshwar Engineering College.
Good evening, Vijay Lakshmi. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me first briefly introduce today's speaker, and later I'll be sharing the highlights of about Bashveshwar Engineering College and about the IISc. Mr. Madhish Sabrad is a senior professional analyst, well recognized in the capital markets with an intuitive yet proactive perspective on markets and emerging investment themes. Have been instrumental in providing critical analytical framework for executive level investment decision for fund managers and particularly for strategic level elevation of projects in the automobile industry, especially for Tata Motors for senior directors. Hope my sound is audible and it's clear.
Yes, it is. Good.
Yes, ma'am.
To share about his education, Sir completed his Bachelor of Engineering from Walchand College of Engineering from Sangli in B Electrical Engineering during 1988 to May 1992. Later, he has completed his Business Administration and Management from Saidam Institute of Management Studies, Research and Entrepreneurship Education. Later, after completion of his education and management studies, Sir has joined as a marketing executive in Siemens for full time and worked for 2 years in Mumbai, Maharashtra, marketing and engineering executive in the power distribution division. Later, Sir joined to as a deputy manager in Tata Motors as a member of corporate finance team involved with business analysis, costing, budgeting, and MIS, and witnessed and played a role in a financial turnaround of the company from minus 5 billion loss to the plus 5 billion profit in 2000-2002 period. And he was a core team member during the launch of the Indica car, the first passenger car by the Tata Motors. Later, Sir joined as a senior research analyst in Prabhudas Lalidhar Private Limited, full time for around 1 year and 8 months as a senior research analyst in the institution equities research group, handled automobiles, aviation, and engineering sector. Sir also initiated a coverage on aviation sector when none existed in the industry, established long-lasting relations with US, Singapore, and HK-based clients. In the 2010, for 2 years, he joined as a vice president in Centrum Broking Limited and senior rated analyst in the institution equities research group. There also he handled automobiles, aviation and logistics sectors and witnessed and contributed to the institution desk business growth of over 10x in 2 years on a low base. Further, in 2010, joined as a vice president in Fortune Equity Brokers India Limited and in 2013 headed the off retail research and retail research team with an expanded role of currency and MF research in SBI Securities, where he worked for around 7 years, almost 8 years. Now, Sir is currently a financial consultant and is having a very good knowledge in stock marketing, trading, and all. And today he is going to present us a talk on uh, business advice for the future entrepreneurs. That is the strategic business plan. With this brief introduction, now let me share about the highlights of our Basveshwar Engineering College. is one of the prestigious technical institute of Basveshwar Veeraseva Vidyavartaka Sanganga. Among its 140 plus institutions and established in the year 1963. This year, we are celebrating a Diamond Jubilee year. The student intake has grown to 3,500 in 2022 with 9 UZ program and 10 departments as recognized as R&D centers by VTU Belagavi. Also, we have 8 PG programs. Quality teaching learning processes are emphasized by the faculty whose strength has grown from 28 to 177, with 93 plus faculty having PhD degrees from VTU, IIT, ISC, and NITs. And BEC has established this institution's innovation council in collaboration with Ministry of Education, Government of India in 2018. The main focus of this ISC is to embolden, inspire, and nurture the young minds by supporting to work on their new ideas and transform them into prototypes. To foster the innovation and entrepreneurship activities, programs like Ideation, Bootcamp, Design Thinking, Business Canvas Model, Hackathon, competitions, and such workshops on entrepreneurs and business plans are being hosted by BC ISC team. Being a member of ISC team, it's my privilege and fortunate to introduce and welcome our speaker, Mr. Mantesh Sabrat. So now I once again welcome all the participants and students and open this platform to the speaker. So I request now Mr. Mantesh Sabrat to continue with the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vijaya. It's a pleasure to be talking to young minds and students of a budding engineering college. I, having been an engineer in my early days, have always been a seeker of knowledge. But back then, engineering was pretty mundane. It was not so technology driven as it is nowadays. Having said that, today I'm going to talk about strategic business plan and generally simple advice that future entrepreneurs should really uh, take in and imbibe in themselves the kind of attitude, the kind of culture that is needed to become a successful entrepreneur. So this is a very basic level kind of introduction, as you all being students would have understood, known a lot of technology developments and must be eager to join either a startup network or yourself becoming an entrepreneur with a startup idea of your own. So let me start with the idea of a strategic business plan. What is a strategic business plan? Essentially, a strategic business plan is something that you plan for the future. That is the tasks that you will conduct or do in the future with an objective or with a goal to achieve certain kind of target. Let me first introduce to you what therefore is the entrepreneur's journey. The entrepreneur's journey is actually in three parts. It's ideation, it's planning and execution, and finally it moves into the growth and scaling phase. These three stages, ideation, which means germinating an idea, which is like starting an idea, or germination, as you would know, is essentially refers to a seed growing into a plant. So this is the seeding activity. Ideation is one of the important phase of an entrepreneur's journey. The second phase is planning and execution. This is where a lot of homework needs to be done. There is a lot of preparation that goes into to making that idea really work. And finally, the third stage is the growth and scaling stage. When you take on the world, basically, you actually start facing up to the world, to the challenges that exist in the current world. So let me start with what is an idea? What is an idea all about? There is this saying that I put right at the top. What worked yesterday may not work today. Similarly, what works today may not necessarily work tomorrow. There's a very important concept that you should understand about an idea. An idea is all about recognizing utility. What is useful is consumed. Utility is nothing but that which gives you something which is useful. So what is useful gets consumed. More the utility of more is it consumed. So higher the utility, more is the consumption. You will notice that in the chart that I have given on the right hand side, it follows the typical economics total utility curve versus units of commodity. As the utility value goes up, the number of units consumed start rising until they reach a plateau and start falling. I'll come to that stage much later, but utility is something which is a very useful concept in economics, and for a future entrepreneur, when you are generating an idea, you should be very well aware of what the utility of that idea is going to be. But remember, more the utility remains the same, less it gets consumed. That is what you will see in the chart on the right, where towards the later part of the chart, towards the right side of the chart, the utility remains sort of constant or barely rises or marginally falls, and the consumption starts to stagnate. Utility is actually an ancient concept that facilitated trade and commerce. You mean, if you're aware of the Silk Road, which was a well-known trade route that existed from ancient China, parts of India, right up to the to the European centers of growth back then, they employed the concept of utility really very well. It was actually trade that facilitated exchange of utility in various forms. But utility as a concept evolved mathematically in somewhere in the 18th century, when the Swiss mathematician Bernoulli proposed a formula to measure marginal utility. So what you're seeing on the right side is actually the total utility curve and not really the marginal utility curve. The interesting proposition of Bernoulli on marginal utility was that it is inversely, the change in utility, which is marginal utility, is inversely proportional to wealth, which means lesser the wealth you have, the more is the change in utility going to be. More the wealth you have, lesser is the marginal utility. Very important concept to understand, because that is where that sentence that I put, which says that utility remains the same, the less it is consumed. There are essentially 6 forms of utility. There is what is called as form utility. There is something called as place utility. The third is the service utility. Fourth is knowledge utility. Fifth is possession utility. And sixth is time utility. Let me explain what these 6 forms of utility are actually, so that you will understand the concepts really better. So the 6 forms of utility is something which makes the startup's idea really germinate. And please remember, if an idea isn't profitable, it is art. That is what it is said. So in a startup universe, you not only ideate, that means you create an art kind of form, you go through the innovation process, you also see to it that it is profitable. Otherwise, it only remains an art. An entrepreneur's mind is a rich, fertile ground that germinates ideas. I'm sure you, as young engineers learning right now, must be having thousands of ideas that come to your mind. That's simply because your minds are much more fertile relative to the minds of, let's say, an older person. The idea or the seed can take six forms of utility, like I said, in any combination of importance. That means each of those six forms need not necessarily be equally important, nor would they be equally relevant. Your ideas will typically have a combination of all the six forms of utilities with different combination of importance and relevance. So, for example, let's take a restaurant startup. Assume that you have an idea that says, let me start a restaurant as a startup. The first form of utility, which is form utility, is when your creative mind converts the basic ingredients into dish, the basic ingredients, the material that you use in the kitchen, to convert it into a dish, a palatable, a rich, or a desirable kind of dish. That is form utility. Each one of you, or since I'm assuming that you are looking at a restaurant startup, that startup creator would have this basic form utility which converts the ingredients into a dish. What is place utility? When you make the dish available online, that is an example of place utility. Normally, you would associate a restaurant with a fixed place where your menu will serve the various dishes that get cooked up in the restaurant's kitchen. But when you make that available online, you are adding a place utility to your restaurant startup. The third utility example in this restaurant startup is service utility. When you can make your dish microwavable, that is an example of service utility. That means you can package your dish so that customers can carry it and microwave it to be able to eat it hot. So that's a service utility that you will add to your restaurant startup. Knowledge utility is something when your dish is made nutritious by choosing the right ingredients so that your typical health conscious customers or clients would be better served by a nutritious dish. This is an example of knowledge utility. The fifth utility, which is the possession utility, is that when you add exotic herbs unavailable locally, that means there are ingredients, typically the various kinds of spices that you add. If some of those spices are not locally available and you bring it from abroad, then you are actually adding possession utility, because other restaurant startups would typically not possess this utility. And finally, the sixth form of utility is when you offer the dish in quick time. You are using the time utility. Very often, your customers would want a dish to be served immediately. You would have heard the concept of quick service restaurants, right? A McDonald's, a Pizza Hut, or a Domino's Pizza. They are all quick service restaurant. That means you order and your delivery comes out pretty much quickly. They are an example of time utility. So, when you are germinating an idea, please think through all these forms of utility and what combination and what kind of relevance that you want to have in your startup. You have to ideate accordingly. Moving on, you have the next stage, which is the homework and preparation stage of an entrepreneur's journey. This is where you make a plan. Making a plan is half the work done. But remember, a goal without a plan is just a wish. You may have a startup idea, you may wish to start the startup, but so long as you don't make a plan, it is just a wish. So what is a plan? A plan is actually a document that outlines how you will bring your idea to life. And you remember the concept of idea being a germination of a seed. Likewise, when the seed germinates, you have to ensure that your idea bears useful life. You have to bring it to life and make it very lively. The document therefore contains various aspects of tools you will acquire and use to create the utility you have in mind, because an idea by itself doesn't just work. Unlike a seed, when planted in the soil, grows in a way by itself because God has created or given it a mechanism to grow. Ideas for an entrepreneur can't grow just on their own. They need various tools to be used so that the idea becomes lively. The tools are like, imagine the tools are as in the arms that you equip yourself for a battle. When you set out to battle, you require various forms of weapons. So if you use the right kind of equipment or the right kind of weapon at the right time, your battle will be won. Same is the case for an entrepreneur. You need to have and choose or select the right kind of equipment that you want so that your business becomes more lively, more survivable, and you eventually win the battle. What are the 6 ingredients of a plan? I've listed 6 ingredients. Very often, different kind of experts would offer different kinds of ingredients of a plan. But to me, there are 6 ingredients of a plan. The first is goal and mission. The second is the product and service that you're going to offer. The third is the SWOT analysis. I am sure you would have understood the word SWOT. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That means you plot what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what the opportunities exist for your product and service, and what are the threats that exist. Some of those threats may come about in future as well. So you have to be very careful when you're doing a SWOT analysis. So SWOT analysis very often is not about today. It is also about tomorrow. The fourth ingredient of a plan is the operations and the team. It's a very important part of your plan because without a proper team, your ability to execute a startup plan is highly limited. You need to have a marketing plan. Remember, I talked about the utility value of an idea. Your utility plan is actually, the utility of your product is actually supported by a marketing plan. And finally, you require financing. Without financing, a startup idea will just not move, right? In the same stage of homework and preparation, please remember if your plan is right, you will not fail. So there goes this saying, failing to plan is planning to fail. So if you don't make a plan, you're bound to fail for sure. So always make a plan. Seek a buy-in and get it evaluated. A plan is not a very difficult assignment, and nor is it a one-time effort. A plan always undergoes multiple revisions before it finally takes shape. My simple advice is when you're making a plan as an entrepreneur, you should not hurry through any plan. And most importantly, the plan has to be documented. It can be a single page document, or it could run into multiple pages. But most often, it is not really a single page document. It runs into typically a 10-15 page document. This is where you actually crystallize your thoughts in a proper document using those six ingredients of the plan. The plan should have a buy-in. What is a buy-in? Buy-in means an agreement. That means your plan should be understood by not only yourself, It should be understood by the team that you're going to work with. It should be understood or agreed to by the financier, the person who is going to give you the finance. And it should have a buy-in of, generally speaking, the overall regulatory environment. That means it should confer to or conform to the various kinds of regulatory regulatory laws that exist. And please remember, it's always useful to get your plan evaluated by a mentor. A mentor will very often spot weaknesses within a plan, very often will spot gaps in a plan and suggest suitable changes. That is why I said a plan is not a one-time effort. It undergoes multiple revisions. The goal and mission, the first ingredient of a plan, is something that the entrepreneur should clearly outline and what he set out to do. It is actually a wish, right? Your idea that is taking shape in your mind should be expressed as a wish. If the wish could be very simple, it could say that in 5 years I will have 50,000 clients, for whatever your product is, or you will say in 5 years I will become a 100 crore company, or in 5 years you will say I will set up my first overseas office, something like that. So you should have a goal and mission to your plan document. Obviously, the second part is the product and service offering, because what you have as an idea should present its utility value. So you should be able to talk about the utility that is being created through the idea that you have and the product and service offering that will come out of that idea. So you have to explain the utility value that is being created. The SWOT analysis, I think I talked about it, but please remember that SWOT is also the competitive mapping about yourself as well as others in the current environment. But never forget to look at how the environment is likely to change ahead. Because the T portion of SWOT, which is the threat portion of the SWOT, very often exists in the future. The operations and team, how your startup will be aided needs to be clearly identified. The place, the pawns, the people should be clearly mentioned. The place means obviously the place of your business. It could be your home itself, for example, to start with, or it could be some office space, or essentially it could be the address for communication. It could be a website, therefore a website place. Right, you may not necessarily have a physical place. You can have what is called as an online place with a website of your own. The marketing plan. Now, marketing plan is something which is a technique that well-honed professionals actually develop. But it is always useful to follow the 5 P's of Mintzberg. Their plan, ploy, pattern, position, and perspective. I don't want to get into too much of details about it. Suffice for you people to understand that to make a marketing plan, you need to revisit these 5 P's and have those 5 P's properly thought through. The plan, the ploy, the pattern, the position, and the perspective. Financing needs, like I said, without financing, a startup will not move, will require you to make a financial projection that shows what your revenues are going to be over each year. So the forecast should be typically yearly. Sometimes it could be quarterly meaning 3 months clubbed together. So your financial projection should include revenues, costs, and therefore the difference between the two will give you profits. It will have the assets and the liabilities. That means your business will typically have certain kinds of assets that get created. It will be the liabilities are typically the funds that you will accumulate or you wish to accumulate, and the cash flows. That means how your revenues will get converted into profits and eventually into usable profits as cash flow, as bank balance for you, for yourself. The next part again is of the entrepreneur journey is taking on the world. Finally, when your plan is ready, it's execution that matters and not the idea per se. So we moved from idea to plan, and now it is about the execution. And in execution, growth and scale is very important. They're not just needed for survival alone, but to thrive, so that your business comes alive, is self-sustaining, and requires minimum kind of intervention from people like you. It has to be reach a stage where it starts going on a self-mode basis, self-drive basis. Of all the ingredients of a business plan, often within what is not often within the control of a startup is financing. Therefore, during the execution stage, your financing needs have to be very clearly outlined, which is part of your plan and needs to be executed well. Because if you don't receive timely finance, or if you don't inject timely funds into your business will not survive. Forget about thriving. Globally, financing is a well-honed industry, and there is actually no dearth of finance available for the right startup. Huge amount of financing is actually available the world over. The reason why there are PE and VC investments. PE stands for private equity, VC stands for venture capital investments. Is it's a big industry that attracts the best of the talent. And why do they attract such talent? Why do you have a huge industry of financing out there? Is simply because startup is the most rewarding investment for such PVC funds. On the right, I have put a chart which is from Bain and Company. Right now, it is not visible, but I will show you the big picture of that chart later. But suffice to say, that chart shows you how the global PVC financing investment environment has been in 2021 and 2020. So globally, the overall VC investments have been of the tune of $700 billion. That means just a shade below $1 trillion. And India in 2021 actually witnessed VC funding, PVC funding of close to about $38.5 billion. And that had grown almost twice, 1.8 times of what existed in 2020. By the way, the 2022 year that has just concluded 2 years ago, the numbers are not yet out, but there is a small growth that you could have seen or witnessed in the PVC investment world. Now, finance million of funding. It's actually 150, 170 million dollars of funding, typical funding size of Series D and above. That is why I said when you reach Series D, you're likely to be a unicorn, a billion-dollar unicorn. Now, who provides this funding in the investment world? I already told you PVC funds do exist. So that's number 5 out of the 6 that I've listed here. But it is not those PVC funds alone who fund. That's the institutional way of really funding. You have even well-off individuals, that means wealthy individuals can also fund a startup in their individual capacity. Very often you will find say Mr. Ratan Tata investing his own personal wealth or money in various startups. I'm sure you would have heard of such names. You have financial institutions. I think I already alluded to banks, NBFCs offering funding. You even have companies that allow or make funding investments. They fund a startup. There is typically progressive companies have their own incubation wing or incubation department or funding department that are actively looking for innovations in the field that they are operating in. So companies are very willing to offer funding if your idea is or your innovation is something got to do with their industry. Government departments offer funding as well, right? We have a startup fund in India. The Indian government themselves have a startup fund that funds viable kind of startups. I talked about PE and VC funds. That's item 5 and 6, which is investment banks. Investment banks very often is very similar to a PVC fund, but it is a different class of investments. So now we reach in that final journey of the entrepreneur's journey that you have done all these things, but let me summarize in a way. What do these various investors really look for in a startup? They look for breakthrough technologies. Not everyone is innovative, and technology is something that everybody is looking forward to. Today, you have AI, artificial intelligence. You have Web3 coming in, where you have various new concepts. I am sure you as budding engineers would have heard the concepts of DeFi, which is delimited financing. You would have heard of the concepts of blockchain and so on and so forth. So breakthrough technology is something that is always funded by various startups, startup finances across the globe. But it is not necessarily breakthrough technology that receives funding. Simple mundane technology also receives funding, by the way, provided you have the right timing. So right timing is something that is well recognized. It could be a simple product that you're offering, which is being offered in a way for the first time at the right time. So if your timing is right in terms of your product or service offering, you will get the funding that you require. You can be an early starter. That means your business has actually not reached even the planning and execution stage, by the way. It's just an idea. There will be early startups that will receive early starter kind of investments. You should have something called as unique deliverables. You should be able to stand out from the rest with your deliverables. I did talk about the same products, not innovative breakthrough technology, but mundane stuff, which is regular stuff that can be offered. But if you are unique in your deliverable, in the way you provide that particular product or service, you will receive funding from an investor. Very often, if your deliverable is unique, you will have little or no threat of actually seeing your business go down. You would have reached a place where there is no visible competition. You have a distinct competitive advantage in your startup. And critically, most funding would look for how profitable you are. But remember, let me add a caveat here. Profitable doesn't mean you have to be profitable on day one, the first year, doesn't mean you have to be profitable in the fifth year even. It only means that how is your path to profitability defined? What is your path to profitability? What will take you to become profitable? Is it time? Is it effort? Or is it a combination of both? That is what they critically examine. You must be aware one of the biggest unicorns in India is Byju's. Is it profitable? No, right? It is not profitable at all. But it is one of the biggest startups in India. It's a different matter that Byju's may not necessarily be doing a very ethically and morally correct business, but I'm not here to advise on that. I'm just going to tell you an example and inspire you to show you that even unprofitable businesses are funded, but they need to have what is called as the path to profitability, or they should have what is called the path that stops the burn rate, the path that reduces the burn rate progressively. So with this, my friends, I end my presentation, but like I promised you before, I will just show you those two charts that I had included in my presentation, which were not really visible. So here you are. The first chart was about the funding sizes, the average deal size in India. So you will notice that in 2022, the seed funding was typically the average size was $1.65 million. It rose to become $1.75 million in 2021. The numbers in the bracket are the approximate number of deals that have happened. 525 at the seed round in the VC funding rounds in 2020, that grew up to close to 940 startups receiving seed funding. Series A funding, which is the next step of funding, was an average size of $6 million in 2020, moved to become $10 million. The number of deals that got $10 million kind of funding each was about 285. The Series B was $26 million, or with 90 such deals receiving $26 million of funding. Then you had Series C funding, which was about $57 million each, and Series D and above, which was $174 million for roughly about 130 odd such deals in 2021. And the next slide that talks about the chart that I'd shown you. These two charts are from Bain and Company. You can do a search. It is very easily available. There are various reports on startup financing and funding available by various other agencies as well. But this gives you the magnitude of funding that is available from PE and VC funds. So here, this is an overview of the various investments that have happened globally. Globally, between 2020 to 2021, something like 1,303 startups to 2,005 startups got funding, together valuing close to 700, or not valuing, it's actually the amount of funds, $700 billion. This is in billion, okay? $700 billion for 2000 or 2005 odd kind of global companies, of which, and here you will notice that global funding is further divided into 4 different geographies, which is US, UK, followed by China, and then India. India is the shown on the rightmost side. It is $10 billion in 2020. It moved 4 times. The fastest growth of startup financing happened in India relative to any other geography. So that 10 billion became $38.5 billion. And something like total PE investments in terms of number of such funds. Now those were 36 to 73. So with this, I conclude my presentation. I'm sure you would have got certain basic idea of what to do when you have any startup idea and how and where to begin. I didn't touch upon such things as what do you need to do or what is essentially the first step of a startup after you have an idea. The first step obviously is to form your own company. It can be a private limited company or it can be a partnership company that you can open, and you can even register it with the central government. The DPIIT gives you registration provided you meet certain criteria. The total registrations until recently, until last year, that is 2022, was roughly about 84,000, 85,000 such firms which have received the startup registration. And roughly about a percent of that means about 850, 900, or let's say 1,000 such companies have received what is called as concessions through the interministerial board. Not every startup in India will receive concessions, primarily of the taxation kind. So you have to apply, post your registration to the interministerial board, which will allow you to enjoy taxation benefits, that is essentially low taxation rates, so that when you in future start making profits, there is no need for you to pay profit income tax at all. So and there are other kinds of benefits available, including simpler, cheaper patent registration if you have patents. That's the environment that the government has created. But it doesn't mean, let me again tell you, that India doesn't have just merely 85,000 startups. There are actually millions of startups in India. These are only registered startups. And as we saw in the Bain Capital thing, only about 1,500 odd to 1,700 odd such startups will receive institutional funding, which is through the PEVC funds. So while there is ample amount of funding available for everyone, but the avenues to reach at the top, and like any other field, is like a pyramid. You start with a huge base, and when you grow gradually up the pyramid, it becomes smaller and smaller and tighter and tighter. So with this, I conclude my presentation. I hope it was rewarding. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the participants' side? You can raise your hand. Hope it was a wonderful session. Any questions, students? Okay, I think we can take it in a thing that it's understood to all the participants, the brief presentation on the strategic plan for starting up a business to be a successful entrepreneur. So I, on behalf of our Bashveshwar Engineering College and our principal, Dr. S.S. Engineering Sir, and the IIC coordinator, Dr. Anil Devangami, express my gratitude to a very knowledgeable person who gave a wonderful session on the strategic business plan to Mr. Mahantesh Sabrat, who is a financial investment consultant at Mumbai. I'm sure that our students have got a good idea about how to plan for a business and to be a successful entrepreneur. And this was thing that even I personally could come to know by undergoing this session, that what are the ingredients to be included to start up a business or an entrepreneur. So it may be with the germination of the idea or the types of the utility you have expressed, and Of course, the six ingredients of the plan, like goal and the mission, product, the SWOT analysis, which is the main part. I think SWOT analysis can be done in any stage of our life whenever we come across any kind of problem. Operations and team, marketing plan, and financial needs. And also, sir has shared about the 5 P's of the plans and funding will goes through the multiple stages. So I'm sure that our students have gained a lot of insights about these business planning requirements to get a uh, how to deal or start with an entrepreneur, startups and all. I thank once again today's resource person, Mr. Mati Sabrad, and I also thank and express my gratitude to my colleague, ISC member, Dr. Mamta ma'am, who is always there for supporting me to organize all such events. Thank you, ma'am, and I thank all the participants for being part of this session. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Hope it was a wonderful session and have got lot of insights from this presentation from sir. So with this, we can conclude. And if still it's open for 1 minute or so, if you have any questions, you can raise your hands and let me know. Or sir is there to answer your any queries. Any questions? Okay. Okay, sir. Okay, thank you. Thank you, ma'am. And thank you all the participants, students, for being a part of this wonderful presentation. Thank you and hope we shall uh, done with this meeting and we shall exit.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.